Rob Reiner spent a lifetime telling stories about loyalty, family, and human connection. On screen, his characters found redemption, forgiveness, and meaning. Off screen, his own life appeared just as stable. A legendary filmmaker, a long marriage, a close knit family. But behind that image, something had been quietly building for years, and when it finally surfaced, it didn't come from a stranger, a break in, or a random act. It came from inside the one place that was supposed to be untouchable. The night everything changed began like so many Hollywood nights do, surrounded by familiar faces, laughter, and celebration. Rob and his wife Michelle attended a Christmas party hosted by Conan O'Brien, a gathering meant to mark the season with warmth and ease. But several guests later recalled a moment that pulled the air out of the room. A heated argument between Rob and his son Nick erupted in full view of others. It wasn't quiet and it wasn't subtle. Voices were raised. Tension was obvious. People noticed. Some said Nick's behavior felt unsettling, the kind of moment that lingers long after the music fades. Rob didn't escalate it. He didn't storm out. He stayed steady, trying to keep control, with Michelle firmly at his side. When they eventually left, it wasn't dramatic. It looked intentional, like parents choosing privacy over spectacle. At the time, most assumed it was just a difficult family moment. No one knew it would be the last time many of them would ever see Rob Reiner alive. Later that same evening, Rob spoke on the phone with Eric Idle. According to Eric, the conversation was upbeat, relaxed, and focused on future plans. They talked creatively, including excitement surrounding the long-anticipated Spinal Tap sequel. There was no hint of fear in Rob's voice, no suggestion that anything was wrong. To anyone listening, he sounded hopeful, energized, and fully present in his work. Yet privately, Rob had confided something much darker to people close to him. He had admitted he was scared of his own son. Not angry, not resentful, scared. It was the kind of admission that carries weight only in hindsight. At the time, it sounded like a worried parent grappling with something he couldn't fix. Hours later, that fear would take on a devastating meaning. In the early morning hours, inside the Rayner home in Brentwood, something went terribly wrong. Investigators later confirmed the incident occurred before sunrise, though the exact moment could not be pinned down. By mid-afternoon, concern turned into alarm when Rob and Michelle failed to respond to calls or messages. Their daughter Romy, who lived across the street, went to check on them. The moment she entered the house, she knew something was deeply wrong and immediately called for help. Paramedics and police arrived quickly, but both Rob and Michelle were found unresponsive. The house was secured, and from the very beginning, authorities treated the scene as a serious domestic case. One detail stood out immediately. There were no signs of forced entry. Doors and windows were untouched. Nothing suggested an intruder. In a quiet neighborhood where sound travels easily, neighbors reported hearing nothing unusual. No shouting, no chaos, just silence. That silence became one of the most unsettling parts of the case. Investigators noted there was no visible struggle, no overturned furniture, no signs of panic. Whoever moved through that home did so calmly and deliberately. That pointed towards someone familiar with the space, someone who didn't need to rush or force their way in. As detectives began reconstructing the timeline, attention turned quickly to Nick Reiner. According to police records, Nick left the house shortly after the estimated time of the incident and arrived at a hotel in Santa Monica around 4 in the morning. Hotel staff later told officers his behavior appeared normal. He checked in calmly, spoke clearly, and showed no obvious distress, no panic, no confusion. After he checked out, investigators searched the room and reportedly found evidence that tied him to the events in Brentwood. That discovery placed him squarely within the critical window investigators were focusing on. As the day continued, surveillance footage showed Nick at a gas station, casually purchasing a drink and leaving without hesitation. Again, nothing about his behavior stood out as frantic or unstable. By that evening, police located him near Exposition Park, close to the USC campus. Officers surrounded the area in a controlled operation. Nick did not resist. He followed instructions and was taken into custody quietly. No dramatic chase, no confrontation, just silence. By that point, investigators believed they were no longer dealing with questions of who to look at, but how everything unfolded behind closed doors. Once the Brentwood home was fully secured, forensic teams moved in. With no cameras inside the house and no eyewitnesses, science became the key to the timeline. Medical examiners examined physical indicators like muscle stiffening and blood settling patterns to estimate time of passing. Their conclusion was chilling. Rob and Michelle had passed away in the early morning hours, nearly 12 hours before they were discovered. That timing aligned closely with Nick's movements afterward. The injuries themselves raised even more questions. Forensic specialists documented multiple sharp force injuries, a clinical term indicating close-range wounds delivered with a sharp object. These were not distant or accidental. They required proximity, repeated motion, and sustained contact. Investigators noted that the number of injuries suggested the event did not end quickly. From a legal standpoint, that distinction matters. Repetition signals intent, not impulse. Based on the evidence, Nick Reiner was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree homicide, one for each parent. Prosecutors added special circumstances due to multiple victims, elevating the case to the most serious legal tier possible. If convicted, the consequences would be extreme, with no reduced options available under those charges. When Nick appeared in court for the first time, the atmosphere shifted again. The courtroom was tightly controlled. No cameras, no live feed. When he entered, observers immediately noticed he was wearing a high-risk prevention smock, a detail no one acknowledged aloud. The charges were read in cold legal language. Nick spoke only once, calmly confirming he understood his rights. He showed no visible reaction. No plea was entered. The hearing was brief, procedural, and heavy with silence. Standing beside him was his defense attorney, Alan Jackson, a name well known for representing clients in high-profile, high-stakes cases. That choice sent a clear message. This would not be a short or quiet legal battle. Almost immediately, questions spread about how such a costly defense was being funded. Nick had no known income stream capable of supporting a case that could stretch for years. Rumors circulated that family-connected funds might be involved, though nothing was confirmed on the record. Legal experts noted that the issue is complex and depends heavily on how assets are structured. Inside the courtroom, none of it was discussed. Outside, debate exploded. As the case unfolded, attention turned to Nick's past statements about his childhood. He had spoken openly about feeling emotionally distant from his father, describing himself as an outsider within his own family. This contrasted sharply with Rob Reiner's public image as a devoted, involved parent. According to those close to the family, Rob and Michelle never abandoned their son. They supported him through years of struggles, including substance issues that began in his teens. Multiple treatment programs were attempted. Periods of stability were followed by setbacks. In 2015, Rob even brought Nick into filmmaking, collaborating on Being Charlie, a project inspired by Nick's own experiences. For a time, it seemed like structure and purpose had helped, but the pattern returned. Instability, distance, fear. By the time of that Christmas party, tensions were not new. They had been building for years. The argument wasn't random. It was a breaking point. After the incident, Rob and Michelle's surviving children released a brief statement focused only on grief and loss, asking for privacy. No interviews followed. A private memorial was held away from cameras. Across Hollywood, tributes poured in, not just honoring Rob's work, but the person people believed him to be: steady, kind, present. Now the case sits in the hands of the courts. Allegations remain allegations. Guilt has not been decided, but the questions remain heavy. How does a family reach a point like this? Where does responsibility begin and end? And how much of this story was years in the making? As the legal process continues, one thing is certain. This wasn't a sudden tragedy. It was a slow, quiet unraveling that finally came into the open when it was already too late. What do you think really happened inside that house? Was this an unavoidable outcome, or is there more to the story still waiting to surface?